I came home early to surprise my wife on our anniversary. When I walked into our bedroom, James Peterson was 42 years old when he decided to surprise his wife on their 16th wedding anniversary. It was a Thursday afternoon in late September, and James had left work at his accounting firm in downtown Atlanta 3 hours early, telling his boss Martin Hayes that he needed to handle a family matter. What Martin didn't know was that the family matter was a romantic surprise. James had planned to come home early, cook dinner, and celebrate their anniversary with his wife Rachel, before she got home from her job as an interior designer at a boutique firm in Buckhead. James made $91,000 a year as a senior accountant at Patterson & Clark LLP. Rachel made approximately $78,000 annually designing high-end residential spaces for wealthy clients in Atlanta's most expensive neighborhoods. They lived in a 3-bedroom house in Decatur that they'd bought 9 years ago for $425,000, now worth roughly $580,000, according to recent appraisals. They had 2 children, Sophie, 14, and Lucas, 11. Both kids were at school and wouldn't be home until 4:30 p.m., giving James plenty of time to set up his surprise. He'd been planning this for 2 weeks. Stop by Whole Foods to pick up ingredients for Rachel's favorite meal, pan-seared salmon with asparagus and roasted potatoes. Pick up flowers from the florist on Ponce de Leon Avenue, the expensive kind that cost $85 for a mixed bouquet. Set the dining room table with their good china, the set Rachel's mother had given them as a wedding gift 16 years ago. Light candles. Put on the jazz playlist Rachel loved, the one with Miles Davis and John Coltrane that they'd danced to at their wedding reception. James had it all mapped out. He'd texted Rachel that morning saying he might be late coming home from work, had a big client meeting that could run long. That was the lie that would make the surprise better. Rachel would think she was coming home to an empty house, maybe ordering takeout for herself, spending their anniversary alone because James was stuck at work. Then she'd walk in and find dinner ready, flowers on the table, her husband waiting to celebrate 16 years of marriage. James smiled to himself as he drove his 2019 Honda Accord through the Decatur streets toward their house. The car had 67,000 miles on it, nothing fancy but reliable. Rachel drove a leased BMW X3 that cost $690 per month, a car she'd insisted on getting 2 years ago when her interior design business started taking off. James had hesitated at the monthly payment, but Rachel had argued that image mattered in her industry. Clients expected their designer to drive a luxury vehicle. It projected success. He pulled into their driveway at 2:47 p.m. Rachel's BMW was there. That was unexpected. Rachel usually worked until at least 5 p.m., sometimes later when she had client meetings or was overseeing installations at job sites. But her car was in the driveway at 2:47 on a Thursday afternoon. James felt a small flutter of disappointment. The surprise was partly ruined if Rachel was already home. But maybe it could still work. Maybe she'd be upstairs in her home office, working on design plans, and he could still set everything up downstairs without her noticing. He grabbed the grocery bags from the back seat and quietly let himself in through the front door. The house was silent. No TV sounds from the living room, no music playing, no indication that anyone was home despite Rachel's car in the driveway. James set the grocery bags on the kitchen counter, called out softly, "Rachel, you home?" No answer. He walked through the downstairs. Living room empty, home office empty, dining room empty. Rachel's laptop bag was on the bench by the front door, her work portfolio leaning against the wall. She was definitely home. But where? James headed upstairs. Their bedroom door was closed. That was unusual. They normally kept it open during the day. James reached for the doorknob, thinking maybe Rachel was taking a nap. She'd been tired lately, coming home exhausted from work, going to bed early. Maybe she'd come home sick. Maybe that's why her car was in the driveway in the middle of the afternoon. He opened the bedroom door, and his entire world stopped. Rachel was in their bed. But she wasn't alone. She was with a man James didn't recognize. Mid-30s, athletic build, dark hair styled with expensive product, wearing what looked like a $15,000 Rolex on his wrist. The man's clothes were scattered on the floor next to the bed. Designer jeans that probably cost $300. A Ralph Lauren black label polo shirt worth at least $200. Italian leather shoes that looked like Ferragamo. Easily $600 or more. The scene registered in James's brain like a series of photographs. Rachel's face, flushed and startled. The man's expression, shifting from pleasure to shock to panic in the span of 2 seconds. The rumpled white sheets, the same Egyptian cotton sheets James had bought from Restoration Hardware for $380 as an anniversary gift to Rachel 3 years ago. The silk robe hanging on the back of their bedroom door, the one James had given Rachel for Christmas. Her jewelry on the nightstand, the diamond earrings he'd saved for 6 months to buy her for their 10th anniversary. $2,400 at Shane Combs. Every detail burned itself into James's memory with crystal clarity. The digital clock on the nightstand, reading 2:51 p.m., the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows, the scent in the room, Rachel's perfume mixed with cologne. James didn't recognize, expensive and woody, probably Tom Ford or Creed, the kind that cost $300 a bottle. Both of them froze when the door opened. Rachel's eyes went wide with shock, her mouth opening in a silent gasp. The man scrambled to grab the sheet, pulling it up to cover himself, his face going pale as he registered that someone had just walked in on them. James stood in the doorway of his own bedroom, the bedroom he'd shared with Rachel for 9 years in this house, the bedroom where their daughter Sophie had climbed into bed with them during thunderstorms when she was little, the bedroom where they'd talked about their dreams and plans for the future. And now there was a stranger in their bed, in the middle of a Thursday afternoon, on their 16th wedding anniversary. Time seemed to slow down. James could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears, could feel his hands starting to shake, could sense something fundamental breaking inside him, something that had been the foundation of his adult life for 16 years. "James!" Rachel started, her voice strangled with panic. She reached for her robe, pulling it on, her hands trembling as she tied the belt. "Get out," James said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, flat, emotionless, like shock had anesthetized his ability to feel anything. His brain was trying to process what he was seeing, trying to reconcile the image in front of him with the reality he'd believed in for 16 years. The man was already scrambling out of bed, grabbing his clothes from the floor. James noticed more details with that same strange clarity. The man's body was tanned and fit, the kind of physique that came from expensive gym memberships and personal trainers. His watch wasn't just expensive. It was a Rolex Daytona, probably $15,000 new, maybe more. His Italian shoes were Salvatore Ferragamo. James could see the label now, easily $650. This wasn't some random mistake. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. Rachel was in bed with a man who had money, who wore designer clothes and luxury watches, who was everything James wasn't. Exciting, wealthy, available in the middle of a Thursday afternoon. "I'm sorry, man," the guy said, pulling on his jeans. His voice was educated, cultured, Atlanta upper-class accent. "I didn't know she was married." That was obviously a lie. This man was in James and Rachel's bedroom, in their house in Decatur, in the middle of the day. He knew Rachel was married. The wedding photos were on the wall downstairs. Sophie and Lucas's school photos were on the refrigerator. This house screamed, "married with children," from every corner. But James didn't have the energy to call out the lie. Didn't have the emotional capacity to confront this stranger who just destroyed his marriage. He just stood there, blocking the doorway, waiting for the man to finish dressing and leave. Rachel had pulled on the silk robe fully now. The robe James had bought her. She was crying, mascara running down her face in black streams. Her hair was messed up, her lipstick smeared. She looked guilty and panicked and desperate, in a way James had never seen in 16 years together. The man finished dressing, moving quickly, efficiently. He grabbed his phone from the nightstand, an iPhone 15 Pro Max, the newest model that cost $1,199. Even in his shock, James noticed these details. His accountant brain cataloged everything automatically, assessing value, calculating cost. This man was wealthy, successful, the kind of person who could afford $15,000 watches and $650 shoes and dropping $485 on hotel rooms at the Ritz-Carlton. "Excuse me," the man said, moving toward the door. James stepped aside, let him pass. The man practically ran down the stairs, his Ferragamo shoes loud on the hardwood. James heard the front door open, then close. Heard a car start, not from their driveway but from the street. An Audi from the sound of the engine, probably an A7 or A8, $70,000 or more. The man drove away, leaving James standing in his bedroom doorway staring at his wife of 16 years. Rachel was sobbing now, full body shaking, tears streaming down her face. "James, please, let me explain." "How long?" James asked. His voice was still that same flat monotone. Shock had shut down his emotional responses. He was functioning on autopilot, asking questions mechanically. "James, I can explain." "How long, Rachel?" She looked at the floor, unable to meet his eyes. 6 months. 6 months, half a year, 180 days of systematic lying, of Rachel going to client meetings and installation appointments and coming home to kiss James's hello and ask about his day and tuck their children into bed, all while conducting an affair with the man in the expensive shoes. "His name?" James asked. "Derek," Rachel whispered. "Derek Morrison. He's a client. He hired me to design his condo in Midtown 6 months ago. I didn't mean for it to happen, it just—" "Derek Morrison," James repeated. He knew that name. Derek Morrison was a well-known real estate developer in Atlanta. He'd developed the Morrison at Peachtree, that luxury condo building in Midtown that had been in all the design magazines. Condos in that building started at $800,000 and went up to $3 million for the penthouses. Derek Morrison was rich, really rich, probably worth $15 million or more based on his real estate holdings. And Rachel had been sleeping with him for 6 months while James worked 50-hour weeks at his accounting firm to support their family. James felt something break inside his chest, not his heart. That would come later. This was something else. The foundation of his life cracking, the trust he'd built over 16 years of marriage shattering in a single moment. "I'm going for a drive," James said. "When I get back, I want you out of this bedroom. Sleep in the guest room tonight. We'll figure out the rest later." "James, please." He closed the door and walked back downstairs. The grocery bags were still on the kitchen counter. The salmon, the asparagus, the potatoes, the $85 bouquet of flowers, his anniversary surprise, rendered meaningless by what he'd just discovered. James left everything on the counter and walked out to his car. He drove without destination, ending up at Stone Mountain Park 20 minutes later. He sat in the parking lot, staring at the mountain, trying to process what had just happened. His phone buzzed. Text from Rachel. "I'm so sorry, please come home so we can talk." James didn't respond. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Rachel. It meant nothing. "I'll end it with Derek. I choose you, please." James turned his phone off. He sat in the Stone Mountain parking lot for 2 hours, watched families walking trails, couples taking photos, kids playing on the grass, normal people having normal days, not people whose wife of 16 years had just destroyed their marriage on their anniversary. When James finally drove home, it was 5:30 p.m. Sophie and Lucas were home from school. Rachel had apparently told them nothing because they greeted James normally, asking about his day, showing him homework and permission slips that needed signing. James signed the forms, helped Sophie with her algebra homework, listened to Lucas talk about his science project, acted like a normal father having a normal evening, all while knowing that upstairs in the guest room, his wife was waiting to have a conversation about how she'd been cheating on him for 6 months. After the kids went to bed at 9 p.m., James finally went to talk to Rachel. She was sitting on the guest room bed, eyes red from crying, still wearing the robe. "Talk," James said. "I met Derek 6 months ago," Rachel said. "He hired me to design his condo. He's a real estate developer. He's 36, divorced, no kids. The first month was just professional. Then we started having lunch meetings that turned into dinners, then more." "How many times?" James asked. "James, how many times did you sleep with him in our bed?" Rachel looked at the floor. Today was the first time here. Usually his place, or hotels sometimes. The Ritz-Carlton downtown, the St. Regis. James felt sick. Hotels, their bed. 6 months of systematic lying and cheating. "Are you in love with him?" James asked. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. Maybe. He makes me feel alive, excited, like I'm more than just a wife and mother, like I'm interesting and desirable." "And I don't make you feel that way?" James asked. "We've been married 16 years, Rachel said. "Everything is routine. We have the same conversations, the same schedule, the same life. Derek is different. He takes me to nice restaurants. He travels for work and invites me along. He makes me feel like I'm 25 again, instead of 40. James absorbed this. His wife had been having an affair because their marriage was boring. Because after 16 years together, raising 2 kids, building a life, she wanted excitement. I came home early today to surprise you," James said, "for our anniversary. I was going to cook dinner. I bought flowers. I had a whole thing planned." Rachel's face crumpled. "Oh God, James, I forgot. I forgot it was our anniversary." That somehow hurt more than the affair itself. Rachel had been so consumed with her relationship with Derek Morrison that she'd forgotten their 16th wedding anniversary entirely. "I want a divorce," James said. "James, no, please, we can work through this. I'll go to counseling. I'll end it with Derek completely. Please don't give up on us." "You gave up on us 6 months ago," James said. "I'm just finally catching up." He left the guest room and went to the master bedroom, stripped the sheets off the bed, the sheets where his wife had been with another man just hours ago, and threw them in the garbage. Put on fresh sheets, lay down in his bed and stared at the ceiling until 3 a.m. The next morning, James called his friend, David Chen, who worked as a divorce attorney at a firm in Buckhead. They met for coffee at 7:30 a.m. before work. "I need a divorce," James said. "I caught Rachel cheating yesterday, in our bed, with a client." David was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry, James, but I can help. Tell me everything." James explained the whole situation. Coming home early for the anniversary surprise. Walking into the bedroom. Derek Morrison, the 6 months of affair, the hotels, the forgotten anniversary. "Did you take any photos?" David asked. "No," James said. "I was in shock. I just told the guy to leave." "That's okay," David said. "Georgia is a no-fault divorce state, but adultery can still affect things like alimony and asset division. The fact that you caught them in the act is strong evidence." "Did Rachel admit to the affair?" "Yes," James said. She told me it's been going on for 6 months. She even told me the guy's name. Derek Morrison, real estate developer. David made notes. Derek Morrison. I know that name. He's pretty well known in Atlanta real estate. Developed that luxury condo building in Midtown, the Morrison at Peachtree. Worth probably $15 million personally. James felt his stomach turn. Rachel's affair partner was worth $15 million. A real estate developer with money and status and excitement. Everything James wasn't. I want to file for divorce immediately, James said, and I want to protect my assets. The house, my retirement accounts, everything. We'll do that, David assured him. But James, before we file, you might want to gather more evidence. Document everything. If Rachel is still communicating with Derek, that helps your case. Over the next week, James documented everything. He noticed Rachel was still texting someone frequently, her phone constantly buzzing with notifications. She'd changed her phone password. It used to be Sophie's birthday, 0614. Now it was something else. James had tried the old password when Rachel left her phone on the kitchen counter one morning and got the incorrect password message. That in itself was evidence of continued deception. James waited until Rachel was at work and the kids were at school. Then he systematically went through their financial records. He'd always been the one who managed their household finances, paying bills, balancing accounts, filing taxes. He had access to everything. He started with their joint credit card, the one they used for household expenses, groceries, gas, kids' activities. Scrolled back through 6 months of charges and found a pattern he'd somehow missed before, or maybe just not thought was significant. Hotel charges, the Ritz-Carlton downtown, $485 per night on 3 separate occasions. March 15th, April 22nd, May 18th. All weekdays, all times when Rachel had told James she was working late on an installation or meeting with a difficult client. The St. Regis, $680 for a weekend stay in June. That was the weekend. Rachel had said she was going to a design conference in Charleston. She'd left Friday morning and come back Sunday evening. She'd told James about sessions she'd attended, designers she'd met, inspiration she'd gained. All lies. She'd been at the St. Regis in Atlanta with Derek Morrison. James took screenshots of every hotel charge, created a spreadsheet documenting dates, amounts, and what Rachel had told him she was doing on those days versus what the credit card showed. Then he looked at restaurant charges. Places Rachel had said she was having client dinners or business meetings. Bones, Steakhouse, $280 on April 8th. James remembered that night. He'd been home with the kids, helping Lucas with a science project. Rachel had texted at 9 p.m. saying her client dinner was running late. She'd come home at 11 p.m. saying the client had been difficult and indecisive. Aria. $340 on May 3rd. Another client dinner that had required Rachel to stay out until midnight. Bacchanalia. $420 on June 16th. Rachel had said this was a networking event with other interior designers. James had believed her because Rachel's career had been taking off. She'd been getting referrals from other designers. It made sense she'd need to attend industry events. But these weren't industry events. These were romantic dinners, expensive meals at Atlanta's finest restaurants, all charged to the joint credit card that James's accountant's salary helped fund. James calculated the total. Hotel rooms, $4,125. Restaurants, $2,340. Then he noticed other charges. Charges to lingerie stores. Victoria's Secret, $180 in March. La Perla, $340 in April. Agent Provocateur, $280 in May. James had never seen Rachel wear expensive lingerie. She usually wore practical cotton underwear from Target or Gap, $30 for a pack of 3. But in the past 6 months, she'd spent $800 on luxury lingerie that she'd never worn around James. Flowers, $120 charged to a florist in Midtown on Derek's birthday. James looked up Derek Morrison online and found a LinkedIn profile that listed his birthday as April 10th. Rachel had sent flowers to her affair partner using marital funds. Wine. $280 at a specialty wine shop for 2 bottles of some expensive vintage that James had never seen in their house. Rachel must have given them to Derek. Perfume. $240 at Sephora for Chanel No. 5. A scent James had smelled on Rachel lately, but assumed she'd always worn. He checked their bathroom, found a nearly empty bottle of her usual perfume, a $60 department store brand. The Chanel was in her overnight bag, the expensive one she took on business trips. The perfume she wore for Derek, not for James. James documented everything. Every hotel charge, every restaurant, every purchase that seemed connected to Rachel's affair. The total came to $8,465. $8,465 of marital money spent on Rachel's 6-month affair with Derek Morrison. He created a folder on his laptop. Financial evidence, Rachel affair. Organized everything by date, matched credit card charges to the calendar, to Rachel's claims about where she was, to the lies she'd told. Then James looked at Rachel's phone records. He had access to their cell phone account through AT&T's website. Could see call logs and text message counts even though he couldn't see the actual content of messages. He pulled up Rachel's phone activity for the past 6 months, found a phone number that appeared hundreds of times, calls lasting 45 minutes, an hour, sometimes 2 hours, late-night calls after James was asleep, calls during Rachel's commute to and from work, calls during lunch hours. James looked up the phone number using a reverse phone search service. It came back registered to Derek Morrison, 678-555-0847. That number had called or texted Rachel 847 times in 6 months, more than 4 times per day on average. How had James missed this? He'd been so focused on work, on the kids, on maintaining their household, that he'd completely missed the signs that Rachel was conducting an elaborate affair right under his nose. 2 weeks after discovering Rachel's affair, David filed the divorce petition. Rachel was served at her office by a process server. She called James immediately, crying and begging him to reconsider. "Please don't do this," Rachel said. "I'll do anything. I ended it with Derek. I told him it's over. Please give me another chance." "It's too late," James said. "The papers are filed." "What about the kids?" Rachel asked. "What about Sophie and Lucas? You're going to break up our family over one mistake. You made this choice when you decided to cheat on me for 6 months," James said. "I'm just following through on the consequences of your decision." The divorce proceedings were brutal. Rachel's attorney tried to argue for a 50-50 split of all assets and substantial alimony, claiming Rachel needed support to maintain her lifestyle. David destroyed those arguments with evidence. The mediation took place at David's law firm 3 weeks after the divorce petition was filed. James sat on one side of a long conference table with David beside him. Rachel sat on the other side, with her attorney, Margaret Foster, a well-known divorce lawyer who charged $450 per hour and had a reputation for being aggressive. Margaret opened with her demands. "My client is entitled to half of all marital assets. The house in Decatur, valued at $580,000, should be sold and proceeds split equally. Retirement accounts totaling approximately $240,000 should be divided 50-50. My client should receive spousal support of $2,500 per month for 8 years, based on the discrepancy in incomes and Mrs. Peterson's reduced earning capacity due to focusing on the children during the marriage." David didn't even look up from his notes. Mrs. Peterson engaged in a 6-month extramarital affair with Derek Morrison, a wealthy real estate developer. She used marital funds totaling $8,465 to finance this affair. Hotel rooms at the Ritz-Carlton and St. Regis. dinners at expensive restaurants, lingerie she purchased but never wore at home, wine and flowers she bought for her paramour using the joint credit card that Mr. Peterson's salary helped fund. David slid a binder across the table to the mediator, a retired family court judge named Patricia Simmons. This is our complete documentation. Credit card statements with charges highlighted, calendar showing Mrs. Peterson's claims about her whereabouts versus the actual locations shown on credit card receipts. Phone records showing 847 calls and texts between Mrs. Peterson and Mr. Morrison over 6 months, and Mr. Peterson's sworn statement about discovering Mrs. Peterson in their marital bed with Mr. Morrison on their 16th wedding anniversary. Judge Simmons opened the binder, read through the evidence carefully. Her expression grew increasingly stern as she reviewed the documentation. "Mrs. Peterson," Judge Simmons said, "did you engage in an extramarital affair with Derek Morrison?" Rachel had been crying quietly throughout the session. Now she looked up, mascara streaking her face. "Yes," she whispered. "Did you use marital funds to finance this affair?" Rachel glanced at her attorney. Margaret gave a small nod. "Yes," Rachel said. "Did Mr. Peterson discover you in your marital bed with Mr. Morrison on your wedding anniversary?" Rachel's face crumpled. "Yes, but I forgot it was our anniversary. I wasn't trying to. You forgot your own wedding anniversary because you were too preoccupied with your affair," Judge Simmons said, her voice cold. "Mrs. Foster, your client's claims for alimony and equal division of assets are not supported by the facts. Georgia law allows for consideration of adultery in asset division. Mrs. Peterson spent $8,465 of marital funds on her affair. She committed adultery in the marital home. She demonstrated complete disregard for the marriage through her actions." Margaret tried to argue. "My client's affair was an emotional mistake, born from years of feeling neglected in the marriage." "Mrs. Peterson makes $78,000 annually," David interrupted. "She works fewer hours than Mr. Peterson and has more flexibility in her schedule. Mr. Peterson works 50-hour weeks to support the family. He handles all household finances, helps the children with homework, coaches their son's soccer team. The idea that Mrs. Peterson was neglected is not supported by evidence." Judge Simmons looked at Rachel. "Mrs. Peterson, do you have any evidence that Mr. Peterson was abusive, neglectful, or otherwise failed in his marital duties?" Rachel shook her head. "No. James is a good father, a good provider. I made a mistake." "A 6-month mistake," Judge Simmons said. "That you financed with marital funds, that you consummated in the marital bed, that caused you to forget your own anniversary." She closed the binder. "Mrs. Foster, I strongly recommend your client accept a settlement that accounts for her marital waste and adultery. If this goes to trial, a judge will see all of this evidence. Mr. Peterson will testify. The credit card receipts will be entered into public record. Do you really want your client's affair documented in court transcripts that anyone can access?" Margaret conferred with Rachel in whispered conversation. James watched his wife of 16 years realize she had no leverage, no strong position, nothing to bargain with. She'd destroyed their marriage, and now she was facing the consequences. After 20 minutes of hushed discussion, Margaret spoke. "My client agrees to the following terms. Mr. Peterson keeps the marital home. Mrs. Peterson receives $85,000, representing her share of equity, minus $35,000 for marital waste and adultery penalty. Retirement account split 60-40 in Mr. Peterson's favor. Joint legal and physical custody of the minor children with primary residence with Mr. Peterson. Mrs. Peterson has parenting time every other weekend and Wednesday evenings. No spousal support for either party. Mrs. Peterson keeps her BMW lease and her design business. Mr. Peterson keeps the Honda Accord and his retirement accounts." David looked at James. raised an eyebrow. James nodded. "We accept those terms," David said. The settlement was formalized 2 weeks later. The divorce was finalized on a cold January morning, 4 months after James had walked into his bedroom, expecting to cook salmon for his wife, and instead found her in bed with Derek Morrison. Rachel's interior design business suffered after the divorce. Not because of anything James did, he never spoke publicly about the affair, but because Atlanta's design community was smaller than people realized. Word traveled. Clients who'd worked with Rachel started hearing whispers about the affair with a client, about the discovery in the marital bed, about the forgotten anniversary. Some clients stayed loyal, but others quietly moved their business elsewhere, not wanting to be associated with someone whose personal scandal had become Atlanta social circle gossip. Rachel's income dropped from $78,000 to approximately $54,000 in the year after the divorce. She took on smaller projects, fewer high-end clients, more work that paid less but kept her business afloat. 6 months after the divorce, James was still living in the house with Sophie and Lucas. He'd repainted the master bedroom, bought new furniture, replaced everything that reminded him of Rachel. The kids adjusted to the new reality, living primarily with their dad, seeing their mom every other weekend and Wednesday evenings. Rachel's relationship with Derek Morrison had ended about 2 months after the divorce was finalized. Apparently, Derek had lost interest once the affair became public knowledge and Rachel was available rather than forbidden. The excitement had been in the secrecy, in the risk, in being the other man. Once Rachel was divorced and available for a real relationship, Derek had moved on to someone new. Rachel had called James to tell him this, crying, saying she'd made a terrible mistake and destroyed her life for a man who didn't actually want her long-term. James had listened and then said, "I hope you figure things out, Rachel, but that's not my problem anymore." He'd started dating someone new. Her name was Lisa Chang, a fellow accountant at a different firm who made $86,000 a year and drove a practical Toyota Camry. They'd met at a professional conference and hit it off over their shared love of terrible accounting jokes and microbrewer beer. Lisa knew about the divorce and Rachel's affair. James had been honest with her from the start. Lisa's response had been simple. "That says everything about her character, and nothing about your worth." 1 year after walking into his bedroom and finding his wife with another man, James was sitting in his living room with Sophie and Lucas, watching a movie. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message said, "This is Derek Morrison. I know this is random, but I wanted you to know I'm sorry for what happened. Rachel told me she was separated from you when we started our relationship. I didn't know you were still together until much later. For what it's worth, she regrets everything. She talks about you a lot. I think she realizes what she lost." James read the message twice, then he deleted it without responding. Some apologies come too late. Some regrets don't change anything. Rachel had made her choice when she brought Derek Morrison into their marital bed on their wedding anniversary. When she forgot the anniversary entirely because she was too focused on her affair. When she used marital money to finance hotel rooms and expensive dinners with another man. James had made his choice too. To protect himself and his children, to document the betrayal and use it to secure a fair divorce settlement. To move forward into a life where he was valued and respected, rather than taken for granted. He thought about that Thursday afternoon when he'd planned to surprise Rachel with salmon and flowers and a romantic dinner. How he'd driven home early, excited to celebrate 16 years of marriage. How he'd walked into their bedroom expecting an empty room and instead found evidence of 6 months of systematic betrayal. The surprise had gone both ways that day. Rachel had been surprised to get caught. James had been surprised to discover his marriage had been a lie for half a year. But the aftermath had been all James's doing. The strategic documentation, the divorce filing, The settlement that protected his assets and his children. The refusal to let Rachel manipulate him into staying in a broken marriage. Sophie looked up at him from where she was curled up on the couch. "Dad, are you okay?" "Yes, sweetie," James said. "I'm good." And he was. Not perfect, not fully healed, but good. Better than he'd been a year ago when his world had shattered. Better than he'd been in the final 6 months of his marriage, when Rachel had been lying to him every day. James had learned that anniversaries could be destroyed in a single moment, but they could also be redefined. Today marked 1 year since he'd discovered Rachel's affair. 1 year since he'd started the process of reclaiming his life. 1 year since he'd chosen self-respect over preserving a false marriage. That was an anniversary worth acknowledging. Not with salmon and flowers, but with the quiet knowledge that he'd survived betrayal and come out stronger on the other side. The movie ended. Lucas yawned. Sophie started gathering her homework. Normal family evening routines. The life James had protected through his divorce strategy. The life Rachel had gambled away for excitement with Derek Morrison. James tucked his kids into bed, straightened up the living room, and sat in the quiet of his house. His house now, not the marital home where Rachel had betrayed him, but his space where he was rebuilding something honest and real. Lisa was coming over for dinner tomorrow night. They'd been dating for 3 months, taking things slowly, building trust carefully. She'd met Sophie and Lucas last month, kept things casual and friendly without trying to replace their mother. James appreciated that. Appreciated Lisa's understanding that healing took time. That trust had to be rebuilt, brick by brick, after being demolished so completely. He thought about Rachel sometimes, wondered if she really regretted her choices or just regretted getting caught. Wondered if she understood what she'd destroyed that Thursday afternoon. Wondered if Derek Morrison had been worth losing her family, her home, her marriage. But mostly, James didn't think about Rachel. He thought about the future. About Sophie's upcoming high school applications, about Lucas's basketball season, about the vacation he was planning for the 3 of them next summer, about his relationship with Lisa and where it might lead, about all the possibilities that existed now that he wasn't living a lie, now that he knew the truth and had responded with strength rather than weakness. The bedroom discovery had been devastating, but it had also been clarifying. It had shown James exactly who Rachel was, someone who could betray 16 years of marriage for 6 months of excitement, someone who could forget their anniversary, someone who valued novelty over loyalty, and it had shown James exactly who he was, someone who could be hurt deeply but respond strategically, someone who could protect his children and his assets, even while grieving the end of his marriage, someone who could move forward into a better future rather than clinging to a broken past. That was worth more than any anniversary dinner. That was worth everything. If you enjoyed this story, like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.